My name is Michael Galvin. I am actually from the area. As I was sharing before we kind of open it up, I grew up in Evansville, graduated from North High School, went through my bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Southern Indiana, and got my first teaching position in Evansville Vandenberg School Corporation. So I taught middle school reading language arts at Harwood Middle School there on First Avenue, which has kind of become an innovative studies center now, and also taught fourth grade and second grade at Lincoln Elementary School downtown. After that, I became principal at Fort Branch Community School for about 15 years, and really enjoyed that opportunity. And then about 4 years ago, I took a superintendent's position up north in Monticello, Indiana, just outside of Lafayette, the Twin Lakes School Corporation. And so I had been talking to the board off and on over the past 2 years, and knew that Dr. Kemp was beginning to look at retirement. And so when this opportunity came open, it was a good time for us to come back home. Our parents were getting older, and we just really felt like it was time for us to be back with our families and to be able to take care of them. So my wife is also a teacher. She's currently got a job at North Gibson and teaching second grade up there. We have 4 children. I know we were talking about babies a few moments ago. We have a 20-year-old who is at Purdue University. He is studying animal science and pre-vet. My daughter is a junior here at North Posey at the high school. Also, my son is a 8th grader at North Posey Junior High. He's the quarterback for the football team. That kind of dropped in his lap because the quarterback broke his wrist, who was supposed to be it. So about a week and a half into the school year, he became the quarterback. And fortunately, we have an 8-0 season right now. So tomorrow night will be our last game. So hopefully we can go undefeated and win the PAC as well. And then kind of like, God has a sense of humor. So we have a 5-year-old who is, soon to be 6, a kindergartner. So I'm going to be one of those parents who comes in at the wheelchair at graduation for him. So, but anyway, he keeps us young, he keeps us hopping. And so as Beth said, we've moved back into the area where we're, as adventures go, we're currently living in a 36-foot camper at my in-laws' house. And we just purchased property this past weekend in district. And so we're now beginning the building process as quickly as we possibly can. So before somebody kills the other person in that small of an area. So, but we're looking forward to coming. We're very excited about being here. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity, and already has just felt like coming back home, the comfort of coming back home, more or less. So
great. I can only think the only thing more difficult with COVID and a new job is also throwing in building a new house on top of all of that. So you take it on.
Yep.
So Matt, although you're the senior superintendent here with 1 year under your belt, so that's great. But I think this is also your first State of the Schools address as well. So why don't you just tell us all a little bit about yourself and about Mount Vernon school districts?
Okay. I grew up in Southern Indiana as well, closer to that Jasper area there in Huntingburg. Taught originally in Indianapolis at an at-risk population school, Arlington High School. And then I went to Jeffersonville for a few years, and then transitioned to Heritage Hills, where I was the head wrestling coach and a social studies teacher at the high school until about 7 years ago. And that's when I made my journey to Mount Vernon to be the assistant principal at the high school, and gradually worked myself up to being the superintendent for the last year and a quarter, which has been an eventful year and a quarter, feels like 10. But it's been great. I do have 3 kids in our school district, 2 at the junior high and 1 in elementary. My wife works over at St. Vincent as a nurse practitioner, and this is just a wonderful place to raise a family here in Posey County. Really thoroughly have enjoyed our experience. As far as the schools go, just for those that are not as familiar, we have a high school, a junior high, and 3 elementary schools, roughly 2,000 students. And all of our schools right now are in the status of having a letter grade of A, except for the junior high, which is a B. And those of you that have ever been around junior high students, you know that it's a challenging time period. And, if you look at the junior highs across the state, B is a pretty common grade, not something we like, but it's reality. But overall, the schools are doing very well, and really proud to represent this community in our school system.
Right. Hey, Mike, just so that we get that information, can you just tell us how many students North Posey enrollment is, and just how many schools you have, and then we'll start in.
So we have two elementaries. The junior high and the high school shares the same building. This year, at our September 15th ADM count, we had 1,390 students. Our administrators, teacher, and support staff totals about 231 people. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So, and once again, we feel like we're doing a great job up here in the northern part of the county, and really trying to provide some great opportunities for our kids. Great,
thanks. Well, certainly 2020 has been just an unprecedented year in so many ways, and so, I just thought we might as well address the elephant in the room right from the start, the get-go, and kind of get this out of the way. But, how did you develop the plan to actually reopen in-person schools in August? And how do you successfully adjust that plan on a daily basis in light of COVID-19? And Matt, let me toss that to you if I could.
So Dr. Camp and I met with the county health department. I can't give you the time frame anymore because everything's just kind of run together, but months before the school year started, and really sat down with the CDC guidelines and just mapped out, okay, what does that look like in a school? There's a lot of challenges. Schools are meant to be interactive. They're meant to be social in nature. They're meant to have that human interaction daily, by the minute, really. So, when you start looking at doing the social distancing thing in a school, that is very difficult to do. And it's really hard to ask a kindergartner to stay 6 feet away from other kids, as Drew knows, because he's had 27 kindergartners in his house, I think. It was a challenge, but we went down and we did every employee group, every scenario that you could think of, sporting events, classroom time, recess, lunch. I mean, all the things that happen on a daily basis in a school. And we sat down and we said, okay, what do we have to do to make this a safe environment for our kids? It took a little time, but we finally came up with basically a checklist of things that we were going to do to provide that safety and comfort for families, and put that list together. Now, as far as adjusting, we really haven't adjusted a whole lot. There's been very few adjustments made to that original plan because the CDC guidelines have not changed. If those change, I could see us making more adjustments, or if we run into some kind of issue that we haven't run into at this point, maybe we would make an adjustment. But overall, we've been able to stick to that plan. Now, the other thing, and I'll let Michael kind of touch on this too, but not only are you prepping to provide education for kids in person, you also have to do it in a virtual realm as well. And that's not our area of expertise. So that took several months to kind of sit down and map out how are we going to do that effectively for those families that don't feel comfortable coming back to school or have a major health concern. And I feel like collectively, our district, North Posey's district, we've done a really nice job of providing high quality education, both virtually and in person. And talking to some other superintendents, I don't know that that's been the case everywhere. So I think our county has a lot to be proud of.
Michael, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so just kind of pick up where Matt said, and I think that's just in the few short months that I've been here, and as well with Matt and Dr. Camp working together, I think that partnership has really been great as Matt and I have worked with the Posey County Health Department. We joke a little bit, they're on speed dial for us. I mean, anytime anything has popped up, we've immediately called either Kyle or Marty down there and really sought their opinion and their input into the situation that we needed to address. I think it's been interesting. You stop and think 6 months ago, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, we never would would have heard of contact tracing and all these different kinds of things. And I know that has probably been the biggest challenge is when we get that positive case of our administration at each of the buildings of really having to go through that process with Marty at the health department and do that contact tracing, and the amount of time that they've spent on that to make sure that we've kind of made sure that no stone is left unturned. And I think the other thing is as I think since day one, as I've kind of joked with people, I said, the decision I make right now lasts for 15 minutes because it's constantly a really fluid situation that's constantly developing, as we saw right before fall break with us moving to virtual learning. And we kind of saw that was going to happen, that probably we were going to have our biggest challenge with our staff, just because we don't have the number of substitutes that we would need to cover when people started having positive cases or being quarantined. And so that really became a challenge. And I know Matt's now dealing with that at Mount Vernon and stuff. So I think it's something that we're constantly, and I think that's also what people have struggled with the most, is not knowing what tomorrow is going to hold. And so we've tried to provide as much normalcy as we can. I think the allowing us to have sports seasons really helped to bring that back. As we're kind of wrapping up our fall season, we're now kind of beginning to turn to the winter season with basketball and wrestling, and how's that going to look, because that's going to be a totally different I think approach, because now we're inside, we're not outside of where you could probably social distance a little bit more. So and I think the other thing through this whole thing, and Matt can probably may want to touch on this a little bit, is I would just like to thank all of our community partners for the tremendous outpouring of support through this process. I hope I'm not missing anyone, but Sabic, Nick's Manufacturing, Country Mark, Ackerman, Girl Scouts, Duke Energy, they saved us as a corporation a tremendous amount of money with the things that they provided to us. And we just truly appreciate them helping to get our kids back into school, because as we've seen time and time again, that's really our kids needed to be back here. As Matt said, socially, they needed to be back here. And so we just truly appreciate that community support that we had.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Sabic, with the Lexan donations to our school district, and be able to put up all the basically plexiglass throughout the entire building, that is huge. I mean, we're talking easily around $100,000 that could have been out of pocket for us. They also helped out with hot spots for like community, face shields. Those are just huge aids to get us back to business like usual. And then Country Mark with their $5,000 donation towards masks, it has proven to be very beneficial as well. What I keep telling people when I talk to outside, superintendents from other districts, other areas of the state, we have a wonderful supportive community, and it's made it easier for us to go back. I mean, it really has. Real quick on the contact tracing, just to kind of put it in perspective, if a student tests positive, at the high school, and they just happen to have been in attendance, what we're finding is that student may have 30 to 50 other students that would have to quarantine due to close contact. We went virtual today. We only have 9 positive cases in our whole district, and that's between student and staff, but I had 48 staff members not able to attend school. And it's just unworkable at that point. It's not safe to have kids in an environment where you don't have enough adults. So the contact tracing, the quarantining, I see that being a huge issue throughout the entire school year for us. I imagine some of our business partners are feeling some of that as well, because you can't guarantee that your workers are going to be there the next day. So that part's been challenging. I agree.
That's right. And I applaud both districts on the available information to the public and the families and that type of thing. I think, it's extraordinary times, but you've done an extraordinary job with that. And so this kind of the COVID and some of the things that we've talked about kind of leads us to the next area, and that is, employment and unemployment and the need for different positions. what we see is many businesses in Southwest Indiana are still having difficulty filling positions in their companies, even in light of the unemployment statistics. So you've kind of alluded to this, but is this also a challenge for your school corporation? And if so, what areas? And Michael, maybe we can pitch this one to you first.
Sure. So, Beth, as you know, in education, we were struggling with filling positions even before the COVID happened. The current environment in public education is really keeping good quality people from entering the field. We're seeing demands of just the position itself, the accountability, the amount of accountability through testing, the lack of funding that we're seeing for competitive salaries. Is just really kind of forcing college students to seek alternative careers. And so, when you look at what it's costing to go to a 4-year college now, a lot of kids are looking at that and going like, I'm not going to spend 50 or 60,000 and then come out and go into education of where I'm starting out at 36, 37,000. And so we're really starting to see that that's impacting us. I kind of have picked up that it's not been as big of an issue down here as it was that I was experiencing in northern Indiana. We would usually start the school year with positions empty or open, and really struggling that last day or two to try to find somebody. And sometimes we were had to put people in there that maybe weren't the top quality people that we really wanted to have with our kids. So I think the big thing is that kids are realizing that they can go into the private sector and capture those jobs and make more money. We're especially seeing this in mathematics and science areas. And of course, those are the kinds of classes that we want our college-bound kids to be taking, the physics, the chemistry, and those kinds of things, and biology. And so that's definitely become something of a challenge. And I know we usually are very proactive in trying to go out to job fairs, as well as to try to kind of look forward to say, are those teachers in those high need positions, are they getting close to retirement, and do we need to begin planning for those positions? But I think the other area too that we're really struggling with is special education. And those kinds of situations, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, once again, they're able to work out in that private sector and definitely make more money than they could in public education, unfortunately. So it definitely has become a challenge for us, and really required us to be creative in how we seek out those individuals, and to really try to get out of the gate very quickly. It's become a very competitive market, really, for those teachers.
Matt, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything he just said. Not to stereotype, but when I came out of college, there were hundreds upon hundreds of social studies majors that were going to coach. Okay. And there were hundreds of health and PE majors that were going to coach. My first eye-opening experience to how bad this teacher shortage was, a couple of years ago, we had social studies posting and I had 3 applicants. Okay, 10, 15 years ago, we would have had 50 applicants for that same spot. I think a year ago, we had a health and PE position open. We had 1 applicant. And again, we would have had 50, 60, 70 applicants 15 years ago. So if we're struggling in those areas where individuals have some extra motivation to teach, they also want to coach, they want to go down that pathway, attracting science and math and English is going to be very difficult. Also, our trades programs, your metal shop, your wood shop, your auto, all those areas, it's been a real struggle also. And I know we're going to get to CTE later in this discussion, but flat out, I mean, we have a teacher shortage, and at some point it's going to be crippling if we don't do something to adjust.
Well, it seems like we've also not only at that, the teacher level, but we've seen districts who have also had to go to, some alternatives because of even bus drivers and substitute teachers, which kind of put us, I think, at Mount Vernon in a e-learning situation.
Yeah, in the old days, if we ran into what happened yesterday, and I had 48 adults not there, it would have been easy. We would have had a sub pool to draw from, because you had people with teaching licenses that were trying to work their way into the system that would act as subs. With the teacher shortage, that population doesn't exist.
Well, and I would also even say too, kind of going back to what Matt said, when I was principal at Fort Branch, in my pool of people that I were interviewing, the second, third, and fourth candidates I would hire as my support staff as paraprofessionals in the classrooms, because then I knew I had that pool there that I could move them in when I had teachers retire, and we're just not even seeing that anymore. So, yeah, it's definitely becoming a difficult time for in education.
Kind of looking forward. So maybe, some of our, as we start looking at changes in education and businesses and schools, and as Matt talked about on CTE, but kind of moving to that, partnerships between schools and our local businesses really can create a lot of opportunities for students and the business partners, kind of outside that traditional, maybe what we say traditional classroom experience. Does your school corporation currently have any business education partnerships? And if so, can you tell us kind of about that experience, where you would like to see that in the next 2 to 3 years? And if not, perhaps looking at what partnerships you'd like to create?
Yeah, we currently have some great opportunities with our local business and even some of our local public officials, where they allow our kids to come in and participate in a career internship program, and that's gone very well over the last several years. We also have the Bio 3 program that runs out of Deaconess Hospital that our students participate in, and that's all been good, but we'd like to expand those programs drastically. Last year, we spent a lot of time with GAF, John Houchins, discussing having a situation where 5 North Posey High School students and 5 Mount Vernon High School students could basically do a school to work program and go there, be basically apprentices and get paid while they're there on campus. They're at GAF, and really learn those valuable work skills and some of the behind the scenes things that happen at GAF, and hopefully would gain employment after they graduated. And if not, we could have a county certificate to let people know that, no, these people are work ready, that they're ready to come work for you. I think it's really important going forward that we investigate those types of opportunities with all of our local businesses. One of the barriers that we're going to face is that currently, high schools are designed to push kids to a 4-year college. And we all know that that's not necessarily the best route for every child. But if you look at how schools are graded, you look at the graduation requirements for students, I mean, it really is geared towards kind of funneling those kids into a 4-year institution. On a national level and on a state level, I think we really need to evaluate that. I think it's time to really take a look at our school systems in a bigger picture, not just, Posey County, but what can we do differently to have a pathway for those kids that are going to a 4-year college, and a separate pathway for those kids that really need to develop the work skills now, so that way they're ready to go into the workforce at 18, 19 years old and be productive citizens and do the jobs that we need them to do. Here locally, I think we're set up perfectly for that. Unfortunately, we need some restrictions to kind of come off before we could go full route that way. But that's where the chamber, in my opinion, kind of comes in. This is something that you guys could help us out with in helping when you're talking to politicians about the importance of getting kids in those apprenticeships, because the vocational classes don't exist the way you want them to. We just don't have those teachers out there that we used to have 40, 50 years ago. They're just not there.
So North Posey, we partner with, of course, Youth First. This is kind of a local organization that provides social workers within the schools. We're seeing more students entering our schools dealing with trauma and needing more social and emotional wellness programs put in place. Unfortunately, those are some of the things that we're really needing to address. We also partner with YMCA of Southwestern Indiana to provide after school activities as well. Then Bob Buckley, Expressway Auto Group down there, we partner with him. He's done a tremendous amount for us here. As Matt said, we're also partners with GFA too for a college pathway program. And then as well as just Barton Automotive, Nick's Manufacturing, they're definitely partners with us here in the community. And and provide a lot to our school corporations. But one of the things that I'm going to be doing as I come in is really trying to work with building those relationships with our businesses here in the northern part of the county. I'd like to create a business advisory council to kind of help us, number one, look at our facilities, to just say what kinds of updates do we need to have at our facilities to really help our kids to prepare to come out and be prepared to kind of walk right into that first job. The governor, of course, has that work ethic certification, so definitely looking at that to see how we can prepare our kids for that. And to really kind of look at that overall within a strategic planning process. It's definitely, as Matt said, we want to create those partnerships. I truly believe that it's best to put kids in real world situations and to really have them experience what those jobs are going to be like. We had an experience up there where our seniors participated in kind of a business day of where local businesses came in, kind of did some work with them on resume building, job skills, how to handle that first interview. And that was really a great opportunity for our kids to have and to really prepare them for that next step. But, the key thing is, and I'm gonna kind of build on what Matt said, underneath some of the state guidelines, what ends up happening is if you have a student who graduates from our system and goes out and runs the family farm, becomes a productive citizen, runs the family farm, we get dinged for them because they did not go on to college. To me, that is not right. I mean, we have created a productive citizen who is giving back to his community, who is running a business, quite honestly, in our community. And so those are the kinds of things that we're really fighting with that system that we currently have in place. The other thing is that we need kids now who are going to become tradesmen. That is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. I know up there, and I'm sure you're probably experiencing the same thing. I had 3 electricians in my community, and all 3 of them were to the age that they could retire tomorrow. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And there are kids out there who that's their love. They want to do things with their hands. And so we need to change our education system to be more able to allow those kids to put those talents in place and really succeed and really be able to grow. And I think right now what we've really tried to do is we felt like that every kid needed to be pushed to go on to a 4-year college. And that's not for everyone.
So is there, we talk about these barriers, you've identified some of those. Is that the primary barrier that's keeping, these, either the school to work and, and the CTE or any of that from doing? And if a company is interested in partnering with a school corporation, what do they need to do? So I guess, can we identify some barriers? Is there anything that we as a business community can do to help you overcome those barriers? And how would a business engage with you?
So almost all the barriers are legislative, and it boils down to that. And I understand over time, over the course of a few decades, why it got to where it's at, but we really need a lot of that legislation stripped down to help us get to a point where we can do meaningful programs for kids that are not college bound. Keep all the restrictions for those that are college bound. That makes sense to me, but there needs to be an alternate pathway.
Okay.
As far as other barriers, insurance sometimes can be a barrier. I know here locally we have a lot of industry that is focused around chemicals, and they really frown on putting a 16-year-old in with chemicals. I understand that. But not every instance not every instance do you have those problems. So if a company here locally would like to work with us, and I'm sure North Posey would say the same thing, give us a call. We're more than happy to investigate opportunities. Sometimes it doesn't work because you do have some barriers you can't get past, but if we can, we'll do it. Because at the end of the day, I want my kids working here in our community, raising their families here in our community, sending their kids to our schools. Okay. Yeah. So, we want to make it work. We really do.
Yep. Patronizing our businesses. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I would say the same thing. I agree wholeheartedly with what Matt said, because, as I believe very strongly that the education system within the county becomes a selling point economically for the county. The programs that we're offering, the services that we're offering, it attracts businesses here, and then also it attracts those residents who are going to be moving in to work those businesses. So I think, as we partner with you, it's definitely going to be something that's going to benefit both our schools as well as the businesses in the community at the same time. The exact same things, though, those were that Matt mentioned. The one thing I heard the most was the insurance issue, because a lot of these companies just really struggle with, how do I bring in this high school kid to do an internship in my facility and provide that protection there without getting into some issues. I think if you want to work with us, let us know. We are tremendously want that partnership to be there. And I think the Department of Workforce Development could definitely help work with us to get us over those obstacles and those challenges and to put something really good in place.
When we talk about, those type of obstacles and that type of thing, and through this, we've kind of thrown out the acronym CTE. And that's a huge, you hear that in the legislation, you hear it in the workplace, you hear it at school. Can you just share a little bit about CTE and how that's impacting your district? Mike, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is career technical education, and this is, I as I kind of began preparing my response to this, Beth, I kind of laughed a little bit because about a year and a half ago, Dr. McCormick, our superintendent of schools at the state, she made the comment, you need to figure out where the legislators are putting their money at and begin developing programs for that. And CTE is definitely one of those places that we've seen state legislators step forward on and put some funding in there. So we are definitely wanting to do that. It's a difficult process because a lot of these CTE programs cost a tremendous amount of money. I mean, you're talking about welding shops, you're talking about auto mechanics, you're talking about building construction. It may be computers, robots, those kinds of things that require a lot of upfront cost to set up those programs. All of our schools have those programs to some extent. We also, I'm sure Mount Vernon, as well as us, we partner with the Southwestern Career Technical Center down in Evansville. And that's a great program for us to participate in. But I think Matt would agree with me, and I'm sure you guys all agree, we want to keep our kids in our communities. We want them to be here in our school. And even though we participate in those programs, we lose a little bit of funding by doing that. And so if we can create those programs here, then we definitely want to be able to do that. Currently, we're offering construction classes, agricultural classes, business classes. We have Project Lead the Way biomedical classes, as well as some welding classes. But and one of the key things that I'm going to be doing over the next year and a half to 2 years is really updating those classrooms to try to make sure that we're providing the kids with the most recent technology that's out there for those different areas. But I think what corporations outside the larger metropolitan, like in Evansville, is we have to kind of look at what's our niche, what are we really going to be able to focus on to maybe be able to get a piece of that pie and that CTE funding, but then also allow our kids, if they need to kind of go to those higher level classes, to move into like in Evansville to get those additional higher level classes. So that's what I'm really working with on the board and the administration, is to kind of find what's that niche for North Posey and how can we keep those kids here for some of those classes.
I agree with everything he just had to say. In our district, we have agriculture classes, some business classes, and a new building trades class that we just developed that all fit CTE. And then we also send our kids to the Career and Technical Center. And for those of you that have not been to that facility, it is amazing. I mean, they do some great work there. The problem for our district and other districts around us that send our kids to that center is that we may only send 15, 20, 25 kids in a year. Whereas if I had an auto program in my building, I probably would have 100 kids take those classes. And that's one of the things that I've talked to our local business partners about several times, that really our local businesses need a lot of volume. And the things that we're doing right now don't allow for that volume to actually be an output. I mean, it's just not there. So, to Michael's point, if we can figure out our niche, in the greater system, maybe figure out a apprenticeship program that makes sense for our community, I think the volume goes up significantly if we can keep them here and not shuttle them off. Just makes sense to me. CTE, that you absolutely, the legislators have absolutely put money into those programs, and it's been a great benefit. So I don't want to knock CTE by any means, but just the way it's structured is difficult.
But this dialogue that you just talked about, I think that's one of the benefits to having this arena today, State of the Schools, in just that dialogue and share of information between our business community and our education, so that we are providing them, the businesses, with the students that they need, with the training that they need. So it doesn't help any of us if we're just educating in a bubble and then say, here it is. And so I think as a region, we're trying to identify where our region wants to go. What do we want to be? As a region, what's our niche that we can draw people in? And so thank you for the schools for being open, to this, and to our business partners, so that we can get on the same page. Because I think in the end, we'll see all of us, it's going to be great. Our whole region will grow. So it's a challenge for you because we've got education, and now we want them career ready in, different trades as well. So, and you're doing all of that with decreased funding, of course, because as we've seen over the last 10 years, I still remember when we got the notice, and Mount Vernon was one of two corporations that they started. They were the first one of the two corporations to lose money under the funding formula. And over 10 years, they've whittled that down to try to get the entire state, at one level. And I know you have been in whatever district you were working in, you've been fighting that, but have done great things. So even with that reduction in funding, what are some of the outstanding programs or achievements that your districts have had in light of that you'd like to share?
Well, let me let's go back 10 years just for a second, so we all understand what happened. They changed the funding formula, and in doing so, it almost crippled schools like ours. Ours in North Posey's and the Heritage Hills and the South Ridges of the world, like it really was rough. It was not good. And we're still seeing the after effects of that with the teacher shortage. There has been some new money that has come back into the schools. But if you look at the money, we are just now at the same kind of funding level here 10 years later, but that does not account for inflation. Okay, so we're still, we're still kind of hamstrung on the financial side of things. What I'm most proud of, and this is not just a Mount Vernon thing, but just across the board, public education survived it. They figured out how to make it work. They made do. Teachers really stepped up and did a lot of extra stuff, because not only did the money get taken away, but a lot of other requirements were added on during that same time period. So just the resiliency of public educators, I'm super proud of. I really am. Now here in our district, even during all this, we've been able to offer high quality programs across the board. Our arts, the band, the choir, the drama are still top notch, where a lot of school systems had to cut those programs and get rid of them. We still have high levels of math taught in our schools. We still have high levels of science taught in our schools. So, even with all those restrictions, we're still doing a very good job of getting our kids college ready. And again, I think we need to do a better job of getting career ready, but from a college readiness standpoint, Mount Vernon schools have done an excellent job of continuing to provide that high level of service to the community.
Yeah, I would agree with exactly what Matt said. 10 years ago, the funding formula that changed really drastically changed public education in the state of Indiana, and we were just talking about this yesterday. It really has become a shell game almost of trying to manipulate all the different avenues that we have to try to do the money or to strategically align the money to be able to continue the outstanding programs that we have. And at the same time, utilities have progressively gone up. I know when I was up there, my utility went up about 10% one year, which cost the corporation an additional $100,000. Health insurance costs continue to go up. So these are definitely becoming challenges for districts as they continue to try to provide competitive salaries, because that pool of money is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think on the other thing too is because both of us have farming communities, that farmland assessment has definitely impacted our property tax revenue. And so that's definitely beginning to challenge us as well and creating some issues there. But I would also say, just like Matt said, public education, even though it's amazing at how well we handle it. I mean, we dealt with it, we addressed it, we move on. We continue to provide those high quality programs. The COVID-19 situation, overnight, our educators adapted and really just immediately moved to this virtual learning program. And we were not prepared for that. We were used to snow days. You got 2 or 3 days off and, slapped up some worksheets and we're good to go. And now all of a sudden we're asking teachers to do Google Meets and Zoom meetings with their classes and all these different kinds of things. And I think that resilience of public education, that no matter what you throw at them, we continue to achieve and continue to rise above those challenges. We've been very, very blessed here in North Posey. We just recently received a $50,000 competitive grant for digital leadership capacity. We're going to begin working with our administrators and teacher leaders on integrating technology into the classroom and that student engagement piece. We also moved one-to-one with our Chromebooks right before the COVID happened in the district. And so that helped us to be prepared for the pandemic, to where we weren't having to send out paper packets for our kids. We could do that virtual learning. But that's the key thing. And Matt will say the same thing. Any dollar amount or any grant that comes up, we're assessing that situation, because that's the only way that you're getting new monies. And I know in my previous position, we captured over $900,000 in new grants, and we're going to do the same thing here at North Posey as I come in, because that's the only way you can continue to provide these programs of STEM related, of CTE classes and those kinds of things, is either through partnership or going out and just beating the bushes to find those grants.
There's a few questions in the chat. Beth, can you facilitate those questions so the gentleman can answer those for us? Thank you.
Yes, and we will take some of those and look at those. Let me, so we get those in. You're talking about, the funding formulas, and some of this, I think, will go into some of the questions that we have. But, the other thing that you deal with is every year you have this one body in Indianapolis who can change your entire plan for the next year. So regardless if it's from CTE partnerships, whatever it may be, let's, look at what's your number one challenge with the legislative session coming up. And number two is the chamber is a real champion and has a great legislative outreach and presence in Indianapolis. What's your challenge? But the other thing is, what would you like to see the chamber, if you could say, put this on your legislative agenda for next year, what would those be? And Matt or Mike, whichever one, we'll combine those. Matt, you want to take that?
Yeah, funding, this is going to be a budget session, so funding is going to be a huge interest point for us. We know revenues are down. so the state's going to have to do something to adjust. My concern is that, if they have too large of a cut, I just don't know if we can continue to provide the same level of service that we normally do. In preparation for next year, because, this year's money is supposed to be fully funded. So really it's about next year. In preparation for next year, we're really looking at trying to underspend our current budget by about 15%, just to try to pad ourselves enough to where I don't have to fire teachers. That's really what it comes down to. If you're looking at education and you're talking about large cuts, the biggest pot of money that you can draw from is that teacher pay. And that's not good. I mean, it flat out, it's not good. If we start reducing the amount of teachers that we have in our district and we start having larger class sizes, especially if we still have a pandemic going on, there's no good that will come out of that. So, if we could just be fully funded at the same level we are now, I'd call that a win going into this next budget cycle. I'd call that a huge win. Something that wouldn't cost them any money, again, we go back to an apprenticeship program. If we can start looking at how do we really set those kids up to be ready to work when they come out of school, that should not cost them a lot of tax dollars. It really shouldn't. If our business partners step up and they allow our kids to come into their facilities, that should be an easy one for them, as long as they can get through the red tape on the federal side of things. So, I just feel like this year, maybe I'd be asking for more stuff, more support in other years, but this year, if we just stay status quo, I'd call that a huge victory.
Michael, you want to add to that?
Yeah, Matt actually had the exact same two that I had down as well. So I think we are all very concerned about the funding formula going into this next budget. And I think the other thing too that plays into this that we really don't know what's going to happen is that whole Red for Ed movement that took place last fall with the teachers going to Indianapolis and really demanding for additional funding. So I've not heard anything in the pipeline at this point in time, but I think that's going to probably be playing into this a little bit as they go into this next budget cycle. But as Matt said, I mean, if we can hold funding consistent, I think that'll be a big win. We're preparing for a cut. We're looking at probably about maybe 10 to 12 teachers possibly retiring this year. And we'll probably look at every one of those positions and make an assessment of do we still need that position or not. I think the career technical funding is probably the other place that, just to try to free up some things to where those kids who aren't going to go on the 4-year can still get a good quality education and go out and go right into the workforce, I think would be a big benefit to us.
So we're cognizant of time, but we did have some questions, and this kind of feeds right into where we're talking about teacher shortages and that type of thing. And the questions were, is there an ability to get temporary licensure for teachers, maybe utilizing business individuals who have, have great experience, but don't have that teaching degree, number one. So is there a way to do that? Do we need some change in legislation to do that? And the second is, how can we increase our substitute teacher pool so that when you get 48 teachers out for contact tracing, your pool's larger?
Yeah. So I'll answer the first part, and we have there are several transition to teaching programs out there that universities offer for people who are coming out of the business world and want to move into teaching. That's definitely a possibility. The state also permits emergency licenses, and so I know in a lot of the situations we've already had to probably use those emergency license situations. And you can usually continue those emergency license for up to 3 years, 3 separate licenses. And so that would be another way that we could definitely get those individuals into the school systems and kind of get them in that process of getting licensed for that teacher program. As far as the substitute pool, if I remember correctly, and it's been a while since I've looked at that, I think it's about 60 hours is all you need of college education to be part of a substitute pool. And I think one of the big things that we're running into this year is a lot of our pool were those retired teachers. And because of the COVID, they just didn't want to put themselves in that position to be subbing. So if you're interested, we're willing to sign you up and put you on that list. So
I agree. Go ahead and sign up today. We'll fast track you. I'll have you in a class next week. We'll bring everybody back to school. There's another avenue that we've actually just utilized this year, workplace specialist. So a person that's out in the community working and has like a lot of hours in industry. If those hours apply to the type of job you're hiring them to, you can use them, and then there's a small program that they have to go through. Our situation with that is, we're looking at just a lack of housing here in Mount Vernon, and we had an opportunity to hire somebody back in that industrial tech area. So what we did is started a building trades program and found a person in our community that had a carpentry background. And so with his hours of experience, he's able to start working with our kids now. And then just has to jump through some hoops, obviously, because that's what the government does to you, no matter what you're doing. But he'll get through that entire process, and then eventually he'll be officially like licensed in about a 2-year time period. So they do have some avenues. They're not all super easy, but they exist. The subbing situation also, I worry a little bit just because we have such a low rate of unemployment that I just don't know if the candidates are out there, so that's a little bit of an issue also. So, we're constantly looking for subs. So if you got a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, guy you met at a gas station, you think would do a good job, send them our way. We'll be happy to sign them up.
Okay, so I'm showing we have about 4 minutes. I know we need to just recognize everyone's time on this. And when we were setting this up, the superintendents both said, an hour, we can't fill an hour. We're going to be done in 15 minutes. What are we going to do the rest of the time? So I think by the questions that we have and the interest, with education, we could actually take the afternoon, but everybody does need to go back to work. So I'm going to hand off to Tara Barney for some closing comments, and just want to thank the superintendents and everyone today. So Tara.
Thank you. And I appreciate the chance to just say a couple words. First of all, to both you gentlemen, I hope you share our appreciation, not just for your time, but for the time of all of your teachers and employees and parents, the people that are making our public school system work. It's an ecosystem that's critical to our region's future. And so, I tip my hat and thank you all for what you're doing, but especially for the leadership in this conversation. I've taken a lot of notes. You've seen me throw a few things in the chat, but on behalf of the business community, this is the most important thing we do, is to make sure you're enabled wherever we can. So I'm probably going to want to get a few more nits and gnats from you on some of the specifics from today, because one of the things that I would like to be able to do is to speak very simply and clearly to the impact of the 10-year ago funding change on your districts. I also work with a very large school system, the EVSC, that has a different set of impacts. So it's important that I can help our business community oftentimes to understand the different impacts. So that'll be a follow-up. I also want to make an observation about workforce housing, because we're keenly aware that as we can get more workforce housing in the Posey County geography, that's going to not only be helpful to you, but helpful to our employers as well. So that is a high priority. And the last thing I want to thank you for is the work you're doing with our businesses already, because John Houchin's program, Sabic's work, Toyota's and other school districts, Barry's and other school districts, they all have some common elements. And one thing we are trying to do as a business organization is to identify those key elements that are making those programs so impactful, so we can take them to scale. Because I think our whole region is going to benefit, and surely the employer community is going to benefit by being able to be much more engaged. If every employer could have 5 or 10 of your students in the mix, then we were starting to build the kind of scale that I think really makes Southwest Indiana the place that our students can count on building a really cool career, whatever it may be. And that is certainly where we're trying to go here. So this has been huge from my perspective. I hope it's been helpful to everyone else on the call. And more important, I'd say to everyone else on this call, let's figure out what we can do to be good partners with our 2 school districts here on helping to enable some of the great work that's already underway. So thank you, Beth, for what you're doing. She didn't point this out, but she happens to serve on one of these school boards too. So I realize you're doing a bit there too. So thank you all so much. And thanks for participating in a great conversation. This may be the way of the future. It's working beautifully.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.